"Shut up, cowboy, you're freezing." "You're sleeping between us tonight," the two Apache sisters said, and the fire snapped like it was laughing at me, the sound sharp enough to cut through the wind, howling across the canyon. Because 5 minutes earlier, I'd been sure I was about to die alone in the dark with my horse gone, my rifle empty, and something out there watching me breathe. The night had come down too fast. A black lid slammed over the desert, and when the snow started falling in thick, silent sheets, I knew the stories were true. This land doesn't kill you with noise, it kills you with quiet. I had stumbled into their camp by accident, following a line of broken rocks that looked like tracks until they weren't. And the sisters had stepped out of the shadows like the land itself had decided to speak. They were calm in a way that made panic feel stupid, their eyes reflecting firelight, their movements precise, as if every second had already been decided. When they pulled me closer to the fire, I noticed the ground around us was torn up, not by animals, but by boots, dozens of them, circling, pacing, waiting. I asked who else was out there, and the taller sister just shook her head and said nothing. "That walks out here wants to be named." As the cold pressed in, heavy and suffocating, the wind carried sounds that didn't belong to coyotes or wolves, low murmurs that slid under the skin. And I realized the canyon walls weren't echoing, they were answering. My fingers went numb, my thoughts slowed, and that was when the shorter sister leaned close and whispered, "The people who fall asleep alone out here don't wake up as people at all." She told me about a patrol that vanished last winter. Men who froze, standing up with their eyes open, their faces twisted like they had seen something step out of the dark and smile at them. The fire popped again, sparks shooting upward like signals, and far off, something answered with a sound that was almost laughter. Hours passed, or maybe seconds, time bending the way it does when fear takes over, and the cold kept trying to pry us apart, sneaking into every gap, every breath. I felt the ground tremble once, then again a slow, deliberate rhythm, and the sisters stiffened, hands going to knives that looked older than the stories I'd heard as a child. They told me not to look no matter what I heard, because the thing out there feeds on being seen, on being remembered. I wanted to argue, to ask questions, but my teeth were chattering so hard my jaw hurt. And when the shadows at the edge of the firelight stretched and twisted into shapes that shouldn't exist, I understood why they had pulled me close without asking my name. Something stepped just beyond the light, close enough that I could smell wet earth and iron, and it spoke in a voice that sounded like many voices stacked together, promising warmth, promising rest, promising that the cold would end if I just stood up and walked toward it. The sisters began to sing, low and steady, a song that felt like it was stitching the night back together, and the thing screamed, a sound so violent it made my vision blur. The ground shook harder, rocks tumbling down the canyon walls. And then, just as suddenly as it had come, the pressure lifted, the cold loosened its grip, and the darkness retreated like a tide being pulled back. Dawn crept in pale and fragile, revealing empty snow and untouched ground where the tracks had been, as if nothing had ever been there at all. When the sun finally broke over the canyon, the sisters stood, packed their camp, and told me to leave before the land changed its mind. I asked them what they had saved me from, and the taller one looked back once and said, "From becoming part of the quiet." I didn't look back as I walked away. But even now, years later, when the wind drops suddenly and the night goes too silent, I remember the fire, snapping in the dark and the way something out there knew my name before. I ever said it, I thought leaving the canyon meant leaving the night behind, but the night followed me, stretched thin by daylight yet breathing just under the skin of everything I saw. By noon the sun was bright enough to hurt my eyes, the snow melting into dark patches of earth, and still I felt watched, like the land was counting my steps, waiting for me to slip. I hadn't gone more than a mile when I noticed my footprints were wrong, too deep, too sharp, as if something heavier had been walking where I walked, pressing down into the ground after I lifted my foot. I told myself it was fear, leftover panic, but then I heard the singing again, faint and broken, drifting from behind me, and I knew it wasn't the sisters. Their song had been steady, protective. This one dragged, like it was being pulled out of something that didn't want to let it go. I didn't turn around. I remembered the warning. Still, my chest tightened when the sound came closer. When it began to match my pace, one note for every step, the land opened into a wide stretch of dead trees. Their trunks split and blackened, as if burned from the inside, and in the middle of them stood a man wearing a cavalry coat. His back to me, his hat crooked on his head. He raised one hand slowly, not waving, not warning, just inviting. And I felt the cold return, creeping up my legs, even under the sun. I called out despite myself, asking if he was real, if he was alive. And he answered in my own voice, saying my name the way my mother used to when she was tired and afraid. The air thickened, the world narrowing, until it felt like there was only me and that figure. And when he finally turned, I understood why the sisters had sung. His face wasn't one face but many, layered and shifting, eyes opening and closing in the wrong places, mouths forming words they couldn't finish. He took a step toward me and the ground cracked, frost spreading outward in jagged lines, killing the thin grass in seconds. I ran. I didn't think, didn't aim. Just ran, lungs burning, heart hammering so loud I was sure it could be heard for miles. The singing turned into laughter, sharp and pleased, and the sound chased me through the trees, bouncing off the trunks, coming from everywhere at once. I tripped, fell hard, snow and dirt filling my mouth, and when I looked up, I saw the sisters standing ahead of me, exactly as they had been the night before, firelight flickering behind their eyes, though there was no fire at all. They didn't move, didn't speak. And for one terrible moment, I thought the thing had learned their shapes too. Then the taller sister raised her knife and cut her palm, letting the blood drip onto the ground, and the earth drank it greedily. The laughter stopped. The cold recoiled, like it had been struck. They dragged me into the shelter of a narrow ravine, their grips iron-strong, their faces tight with anger and fear. The shorter sister told me I had been marked the moment I slept between them. Not cursed, not chosen, just noticed. And that noticing was enough. She said the thing wears people like coats, uses their memories to bait the living, and that it had warned soldiers, hunters, even children who wandered too far from campfires that burned too low. I asked why it hadn't taken me yet, why it let me run, and the taller sister said it was patient, that it liked to see how hope tasted before it swallowed it. They made a circle with ash and salt, forced me to sit inside it, and began another song, harsher this time, full of broken notes that scraped against the air. My head throbbed, my vision blurred, and I saw flashes of places I had never been, frozen rivers filled with faces, camps buried under snow with hands reaching up, eyes open and begging. The ground shook again, harder than before, and cracks split the ravine walls, stones raining down around us. A shadow fell over the circle, massive and breathing, and a voice pressed into my skull, telling me it could keep me warm forever. The sisters shouted for me to close my eyes, to think of fire, of noise, of anything alive and loud, and I did, clinging to memories of crackling wood, horses snorting, my own heartbeat pounding. The pressure built until I thought my head would split, and then there was a sound like thunder tearing itself apart. Silence followed, deep and absolute. When I opened my eyes, the shadow was gone, the ravine still, the sisters kneeling and exhausted, blood streaking their hands. They told me this was the last time they could help, that the land had been pushed too far, and that if I stayed, it would find another way in. As they turned and walked away, blending into the rocks and light, I realized something worse than the cold had settled into me. The silence wasn't empty anymore. It felt full, patient, and when the wind dropped and the world went too quiet, I knew it was still listening, waiting for the moment I forgot to be afraid.